everyone. This is update for October 6, 2022, day 225 of the war, end of the date update. So it's fairly quiet on the front line in terms of not much of the offensive action by Ukrainian side right now. Most likely, Ukrainian command is still regrouping, preparing for the next strikes. Ukrainian troops are sort of approaching Russian defensive positions. So, as I said, that's a big mistake, but that's how it's being done. So it's being quiet this past couple days. Probably the action will renew in a day, 2 or 3, as the opportunity is there, and there is significant pressure in the Ukraine political top, on military top, to show results from Ukrainian society for the most part. Well, for the most important sort of kind of like stakeholder, let's put this way. So today I just want to a little bit talk about this endemic systemic corruption in Ukraine. And you can see here two people. They are former heads of the Central Bank of Ukraine. And in my opinion, this is just opinion. I just want to make, because I understand that this could lead to some kind of legal action. So I would say this is opinion. Everything that's said here is opinion. So essentially, the first person, this Valeria Gontareva, so she was head of the Ukrainian Central Bank, I think, starting from 2014. And then she was squeezed out in 2017, and she fled to London, where she lives right now. And she was basically, in my opinion again, laundering money first for Yanukovych, President Yanukovych, which was Russian puppet, if everybody remembers that. That was the sort of trigger for Ukrainian revolution in February 2014, and then Russian invasion in Ukraine and annexation of Crimea. So she was basically helping his administration to launder money, basically what they loot from the public finances. Then she helped to kind of like clean up that money and basically put them into bank accounts. Then she was actually appointed head of central bank after the revolution by the newly elected Ukrainian president. His name is Poroshenko, and she was he's kind of like, I'd say, partner in crime. And the irony of all of that Poroshenko was actually working for Yanukovych. He was Minister of Economy in his government. So essentially, as you can see, that there is, I think, a saying that the fruits from the revolution are not sort of used by those who actually were active in doing it, but all kind of negative people, let's put it this way. So this is exactly the case of that. So essentially, then she was helping this President Poroshenko to do again the same, what she knows best, and do this, let's call it white collar crime. We can kind of catch all phrase for all of this. But then, because of the internal fighting, because there is a lot of factions inside, some of these corrupt people got unhappy because they got less, so she got pushed out. She was kind of scared for her own life, because obviously when you talk about this big money being stolen, your life is on the line. So she fled to London, where she lives right now. So this is just one example of this top level, high level, white collar crime and corruption. Now there's this recent head of central bank, Kirill Shevchenko, which was appointed by the current Ukrainian president, totally his creature. And so he resigned. He's kind of like a little bit sort of, I guess, more intelligent, knows better how to deal with how to exit the scene of the crime in the most efficient way. Let's put this way. So what he did, he put resignation notice. It was voted in the parliament about 2 or 3 days ago, and then he left the country, as you can imagine. And now then this National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, then they just woke up and said like, oh, we're alleging him of stealing some, significant amount of money, basically, like laundering, kickback schemes, and all that fun stuff. Basically, again, white collar crime. Uh, so what I'm trying to explain with all of this is that the problem is not in a person, like not this Valeria Gontareva, this Kirill Shevchenko. As you can see, these people come and go, but the whole incentive, the system for corruption remains there. And essentially, it doesn't matter whether it's going to be, person ABC or XYZ, as long as the system that incentivizes corruption is there, then there will be corruption. And sometimes I get these emails from people from the West thinking somehow that West can make miracles and cure corruption by capturing person ABC or XYZ. No, it's very delusional and very misguided, because in many ways West helps corruption to flourish in Ukraine by supporting this broken system of incentives for corruption. And the way it's happening is through financing this whole, in the past, all of these corrupt Ukrainian governments, because they were receiving money from IMF, which if you corrupt, you steal, you cannot steal forever. The system will collapse. So the only way to continue doing over a long period of time is to get sort of external finances, external support, which then you steal. And so this is what's been happening since basically like late 90s, essentially, when Ukraine got hooked on this heroin from International Monetary Fund, and which haven't resolved single problem in Ukraine and actually made things worse, and essentially deindustrialized Ukraine and created this whole political class that's completely rotten and corrupt. And so there is essentially in that class is really no no healthy part there. That's all completely rotten. And that's what Russian KGB, FSB, Russian political top is seeing, because they have all of their agents that report, and they report everything is so corrupted, we can buy anyone. There is a saying, it was actually kind of like a joke. So there was a question of some FSB or KGB general, okay, like, do you need more agents in Europe? And he's like, yes, we definitely need more agents in Europe. Do we need more agents in the US? Definitely we need more. What about, do we need more agents in Ukraine? And the response was, no, we have way too many. So this is kind of like, obviously this is anecdotal, this is just a joke, but there's a kernel of truth in that. And that's part of the reason why Russian leadership decided to attack Ukraine, right? Because they saw that the state is completely failing, completely corrupt, and not capable of anything. And that was the bigger part of the final decision. Where the Russian leadership and government miscalculated is Ukrainian people. They didn't think that Ukrainian people have their say in their future, or want to have the say in their future, and that they want to keep Ukraine, that Ukrainian people want Ukraine to work for them, that's sort of their property, right? And so that's what they didn't understand, and that's where Ukrainian citizens, they doing sacrifice because that's their vital personal interest. Not how, because Russian propaganda then portrays all of this, we sacrifice as Ukrainian people that they are, fighting for the interest of the West or for interest of let's say, Democratic Party in the U.S. or for interest of globalists, which is absolutely far from the truth. Ukrainian people fight for their own vital economic interest, and they want to control and own their country, which they've been prevented for the past 30 years. And that's what's really happening in terms of perspective of Ukraine or Ukrainian citizens. And that's why there is essentially two different worlds, which is this corrupt Ukrainian top, where there's no healthy part at all, and then Ukrainian population that's fighting for its own future in totally different sort of two parallel worlds. So I hopefully this explains sort of like true Ukrainian perspective, not what Russian propaganda is trying to, how they try to portray Ukraine or Ukrainian people. It has nothing to do with basically what they say. And the problem with Ukrainian sort of population or citizens is that they had long history of not having its own country, state. So there's problem with understanding how to create system, basically, how to think in a system, how to be systemic. And that's very big weakness in the Ukrainian society itself, and why Ukrainian society, when it tried to sort of create state in the past, let's say 100 years ago, and it failed, because this is not the first time. Ukraine used to have its own state, then it was basically destroyed, and they tried again, it failed. So this has been long sort of struggle actually to actually have its own sort of destiny in its own hands. So this is just another attempt in those series. So going back to all of this corruption, so the corruption is always systemic problem. It's not a problem of person ABC or XYZ. That really means that there are incentives for that draw new and new people to do corrupt things. And until you remove those incentives, things will not change. And putting people to jail does not change that, because the spoils of corruption are so big, so great, and many of them got very successful because the spoils are so big that you can pay off pretty much everyone you want. So there will be always draw of people who want to sort of do that. Now let's actually a little bit switch to what's going on in Russian society, because there's actually some interesting open discussion, which is very unusual for the Russian society, where there is head, like member of Russian parliament, who is head of defense committee in Russian parliament, openly accused Russian Minister of Defense and head of Russian Ministry of Defense, saying like, okay, please stop telling us lies about what's going on the front line, what's going on the ground, because it's all lies. And there's a lot of other sort of prominent Russian public figures saying openly, like, stop lying to us. We fed up with your lies. Because they were saying in 1941, when the Soviet Union was losing the war and losing huge amount of territories, at least that propaganda machine was honest and open and just would say, today we lost town XYZ, the next day we lost town ABC. So, and that's, again, not happening. So you can see how much more the system degenerated, even from the pretty terrible Soviet system. So this is also goes back to, to those people who take at the face value reports from the Russian Ministry of Defense, because sometimes I also get emails saying like, oh, did you see that? Like, Russian Ministry of Defense says that they, captured this ABC. This was almost a little bit like a few months ago, when the Russian troops were actually making advances. In many cases, they were sort of like exaggerated and not true advances, and people would take it at the face value. Or there were questions about like, oh, like how this Ukraine lost, I don't know how many, like 400 airplanes or whatever, something in the reports of the Russian Ministry of Defense, or that Ukraine lost like, I don't know, 100,000 soldiers, meaning dead, per reports of Russian Ministry of Defense. It's all false, bogus lies. So it's even now, hopefully, within the Russian system, there's clear answer like for you, and hopefully you understand this, and will be sort of not taking things at the face value. The same is true for Ukrainian. To be fair, the same is true for Ukrainian side, where Ukrainian Ministry of Defense and Command is also lying about the losses. In the past, it was lying about the lost territories, so it wouldn't report. Right now, it's actually very terrible at reporting what was liberated as well. So it's again this. They both twins in many ways. This whole, because they all coming from the old Soviet system, but they actually, as a summary, they even become even worse and degenerated even more relative to the Soviet system. Then let's actually switch a little bit gears, talk a little bit about the export of grain agriculture from Ukraine. So it looks like, if you remember, there was agreement that allowed temporary, actually, they call the key point that most people missed, temporary export of grains from Ukraine for 120 days. Well, I think it was signed end of June or early July. So that 120 days ends, I think, again, either end of October or early November. And it doesn't look that that deal will be renewed, because that deal required agreement of Russia and Ukraine so that they both can freely export their grains to the world market. Apparently, that deal didn't work out for Russia well, so there are signs that they don't want to renew this deal. And one of the signs is that they using bureaucratic procedures to hold those grain carriers for longer period of time. They started doing that. So essentially, they try to reduce in volume of grain that's getting exported out of Ukraine, essentially. Uh, Now let's move to a little bit energy. And situation in Europe, energy-wise, is remaining super, let's say, negative and bleak, without, without even sort of like the sort of, how to say, light at the end of the tunnel. Because, for example, in Germany, the government decided that they're gonna simply provide help of 200 billion euros for those affected by the high energy prices, which is, let's say, very populist, and to be very blunt, like simple lie, because you cannot print, crude oil and natural gas, right? Yes, you can create that money, but all it will create is even more inflation. Well, it's not even money; it's just currency. Basically, it's that, right? So that will ensure even more inflation in continental Europe. And part of the sort of ugly head, you can see that the interest rate on the Italian government bonds is rising. I think it hit 4.5%. And that at some point, not far away, it will become problematic for the Italian government to service the debt, because the country is highly leveraged. So this may eventually lead to rupture in the European Union and euro as a currency, as it may not work out for the for all countries, because as you can see, many because Europe had like euro had like created structural problems in Europe itself, where it works really. It used to work really great for Germany because it helped it to keep the industrial base, versus it effectively destroyed industrial bases in the weaker countries such as Italy, Spain, part of France, all of those who are on the weaker side, they got essentially deindustrialized. And now there are problems that related to financing those holes that were created by this deindustrialization. And that may create too many problems for Germany to handle essentially, because now its own industry is being destroyed and Germany itself being deindustrialized, right? So now there is no base to support all of this huge amount of debt that's being created. And that can create a really catastrophic financial situation down the road in Europe, in continental Europe. And UK is going through its own set of problems, because initially there was hope, but there are also very recently the actions there also sort of going in a similar direction of like, okay, let's go into more debt, and that's not a solution really. That the problem is all of this because West decided to block supply of Russian commodities to the world market. That created the problem that Western countries or governments cannot run deficits, and they used to run deficits that become embedded in the system there, and so now they cannot do that. And when they try, it manifests in a huge inflation, which destroys the society from within. Because there was a very good saying by, I think it was Lenin or Karl Marx, one of those, because they were very, let's say, they were evil mind, but they were very intelligent at the same time. And they were, I think it was Lenin who said that the best way to destroy the society is to debauch its currency, right? And inflation is exactly how you destroy the currency. And so, from that perspective, if you follow that recipe, the governments in Europe are perfectly on track to do exactly what Lenin would want them to do. Let's put it this way: to create opportunity for people like Lenin. And so that's what's going on there. Let's actually now switch to the front line. At the high level, I just want to highlight a couple of things. So the Russian command actually kind of actively reshuffled the troops. So you can see that they pulled from North Donbass group 2 units here, 61st Naval Infantry Brigade, which I mentioned yesterday, also 90th Tank Division, which is remnants, right? It's just a shadow of itself. I don't think there's even more than 20% of its original strength. So this is just consolidated units, right? Not like close to nothing. Nevertheless, it's being pulled from there, and it was moved to Kherson bridgehead. There was also another unit that was pulled from Zaporizhya group, 810th Naval Infantry Brigade. It was moved also to Kherson bridgehead. So as you can see, Russian command decided to build up quite of list of the units, which is probably the good way to say that there is impressive list of the units that's not as impressive on the ground in terms of the number of boots on the ground and number of equipment, but it also signifies resolve by Russian command to basically hold on to Kherson bridgehead as much as they can. And I just would like to explain why this is happening. Is there are two reasons. One major one is they need to protect this freshwater channel that takes water from Dnipro River and essentially makes life possible in Crimea, on Crimean Peninsula, because it's pretty waterless, with the exception of the most southern part of Crimean Peninsula, where there is water from the mountains. But that's not totally not enough relative to the sort of population and demands and economy there. That water can probably sustain 600 to 700,000 people. Population in Crimea is probably 2.5 thousand, could be even a little bit more, because this is kind of like very popular, let's say, destination location in the former Soviet Union. In a way, it's kind of like California in the U.S. in some ways. Not perfect analogy, but just so people who are not very familiar with that area can understand better, because it has very nice climate. It's not quite California, but it's very close, and has pretty good nature there in the in exactly that southern part that's uh, protected by the mountains. The northern part is like semi-desert steppe, extremely flat, even more flatter than, let's say, this southern Ukraine. And it has kind of like a salt water under the ground, so there's a lot of sort of like problems there. But basically, going back to this, so the idea is to protect this channel at all costs. And the second reason is this bridgehead uh, preserves opportunity for Russian command to renew attacks into Ukraine, because they did not achieve the goals that they wanted. And the immediate goals, just a reminder, is this Odessa here. There is nuclear power plant here in Pivdенно-Ukrainsk in this area, which is the second one, second largest one in Ukraine after Zaporizhya one. Then there is a really big industrial hub, this Kryvyi Rih. Nikopol is another large industrial city. Basically, this whole area is, to extent, let's say, industrial heart of Ukraine in many ways. This, if you take Dnipro, this kind of like this area, this western part of Dnipro region, essentially, and including Zaporizhia too. So this would, if Russian command troops capture this would put basically, um, the stake in the heart of Ukrainian economy. This would definitely put it into deathbed, into coffin. Let's put it this way. So this is important to keep this bridgehead, because that allows that kind of like springboard to all of these directions here. Not to mention that it essentially blocks all of the seaport facilities here. So it has many it's many prone kind of like tool that helps the Russian leadership to undermine Ukraine, essentially, Ukraine's ability to continue the fight. So again, so this is what's going on here. There, Russian command is also moved a little bit troops to this North Luhansk section of the front line, as mentioned, this 61st Naval Infantry Brigade. There are some reports that some of the those reserve units, or basically conscripted soldiers, being the first wave, has been pushed to this North Luhansk and also to Kherson bridgehead, which again shows that there is a resolve not to lose more territory there. Also, what is important to notice is how quickly and Russian command reacts to the situation, and how quickly they're able to quickly accumulate the number of the units, even though this is not huge number of people, because as we said, those units are weakened significantly. Nevertheless, they manage to sort of shuffle units pretty quickly. So because what happened here, if you remember, Russian command was expecting imminent attack here near Vuhledar that would go in direction of Mariupol. So they built up extremely quickly all of these four naval infantry brigades, which is one of the type of the Russian units that have strong fighting spirit. So they brought them in here to prevent that future attack. But as soon as they saw like, okay, nothing is happening, they started sort of throwing them in, other threatened areas on the front line. Now let's actually start walk through the front line, starting from the very north and going in a south in a clockwise fashion. So there was some exchange of artillery fire along the state border, a little bit more than before, which was fairly quiet, but nothing sort of significant, nothing major there. Let's move now to North Luhansk section of the front line. This was on October 3rd. Russian troops were in full retreat, borderline panic retreat. Then right now they kind of like regained control, and there's pretty much no movement by Ukrainian troops at this point. So what Russian sources report that Ukrainian command is sort of creating the iron fist to continue attacks. But the key point goes to what I said before, that the time was lost and inability of Ukrainian units to pursue Russian units on their own backs, create this opportunity to create sort of to reestablish the front line. Even this is temporarily, as you can see, it's kind of like broken in some of the areas. So the sort of writing is still on the wall that probably like Svatov and Kremina are going to get lost. But what Russian command wants to do, they want to buy time. So they want to lose it in as slow fashion as possible, because they're expecting those reinforcements relatively soon in large numbers. Not like, 2,000-3,000 soldiers, but more like, 50,000, right? 100,000, which will change situation, even if it's temporarily, into more balanced situation, because right now initiative is completely in Ukrainian command's hand. But otherwise, situation here is pretty sort of stable, and there's no major attempts by Ukrainian troops to continue exploiting this whole situation on this front line. Well, at the same time, this is area where where there is opportunity. So pretty sure that Ukrainian command will continue sort of attacks in this area. Now let's quickly jump to this North Donbass section of the front line. Things here are pretty much as always, where Wagner mercenaries continuing attacks in all of the Soledar, Bakhmut, south of Bakhmut area. There is not much sort of gains in this sort of northern part of it. There are some reported gains by Russian sources where they claim that Wagner mercenaries captured this village Vesela Dolina and Vidradivka, this one, and majority of Zaitsevo. Don't have independent or any kind of other confirmation. So for now, I just want to put it out there. Probably in a day or two or three, we'll know for sure if this has happened. Regardless, even if this is true, this is just a tactical sort of advance that doesn't change anything, doesn't bring Russian side closer to sort of success or victory in the war. It's as I mentioned before, all it does is just pulls it deeper into the hole, this Russian troops and Wagner mercenaries. At the same time, needs to be said that Wagner mercenaries are pretty capable unit, strong fighting spirit, and the big reason for that is there is essentially no red tape, right? There is pretty much no bureaucracy, and soldiers are empowered to do what they think is the right thing. And that's what distinguishes them from regular Russian troops and from regular Ukrainian troops. Now let's quickly move to the central Donbass section of the front line. Things here pretty much sort of stable. some weak Russian attacks out of this Piski salient and a little bit south of Marinka, but really nothing major. By the way, I just want to highlight that 61st Naval Infantry Brigade is not here, and the same is true for 110th Naval Infantry Brigade. Again, I will remove them. Sorry for not removing that perfectly. Now let's quickly look at what's going on at Zaporizhya front line. Things here are stable, no major changes. As I mentioned before, Ukrainian command, Ukrainian sort of army does not have resources to like open the third offensive here in this area, and that was a mistake by the Russian command to expect something here, which is why they concentrated all of these units here. But now they're realizing it, and that's why they pulled this 110th Naval Infantry Brigade to Kherson bridgehead. Now let's quickly look at what's going on Kherson bridgehead. So Ukrainian troops slowly catching up to retreating Russian troops, which they started. They built some resemblance of their front line here. So Ukrainian troops are approaching, starting to put some pressure on that front line, but there is still no major sort of like attempt to kind of like break through. They still kind of like on the move and preparing for the sort of next step. Most likely that Ukrainian command will continue to seek sort of success on this section of the front line because it's at this point extremely close to this dam here, Nova Kakhovka, and basically getting there will create total disaster, even from a perspective psychologically. It will definitely demoralize the rest of the Russian troops here and potentially can create disorderly collapse on the entire bridgehead. At the same time, as you can see, Russian command is resolved to hold this bridgehead. At the same time, also the number of the units increased. Somewhat increased the number of the soldiers on the ground, not hugely, but to some extent. But there is a very acute shortage of artillery shells for these Russian troops here because of the logistics is largely disrupted. Yes, there is something gets on the bridgehead, but it's totally not enough to what Russian troops need in order to sort of practice their typical practice of sort of shelling at will in huge numbers artillery shells. And that's part of the reason why Ukrainian troops will be able to continue to achieve sort of gains in this area because basically Russian troops here are deprived of their main tool of attack and defense. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow, bye bye.